This is not Real Madrid, is it?
No. It could be, though. I'll somehow bring it into the lecture.
It's a good one, yeah.
That's a fun game to play, I guess. Just before the lecture, somebody gives you 3 words that you have to weave into the lecture somehow.
Right.
Yes. Yeah, don't do that, please.
That's very Rohan.
Anthony Quinn. Spyworth.
Okay.
We get that is that. Just for the fun of it.
So good evening, everyone. Upanagar Shikshan Mandal's Kamla Raheja Vidyanidhi Institute for Architecture and Environmental Studies welcomes you to a special lecture by Professor Neelkant Chhaya, who has been an eminent member of the Academic Council. I would now like to call upon Professor Ashok Lal to introduce our speaker. Professor Lal.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Mamta. Well, I don't think I really need to introduce Neelkant Chhaya to all of you who are there, whether they are your students or you members of the faculty, or maybe people who are no longer with the school or have passed on, but I really don't need to introduce him. But maybe a few pointers towards his depth of experience in education may be useful. So one interesting thing is that for Neelkant, it's like coming back to Gujarat from Nairobi. Was a kind of, I mean, I shouldn't be using this term, but it's a kind of very genuine ghar wapsi. It was really bonding with a culture that is his very, his inner soul. And it is really with that spirit I see that when he came here and started and joined SEPT and started teaching there, and for 24 years he taught, and he became the dean there. I don't know how many years you were dean, Chhaya?
About 4 years.
About 4 years. So you became, that was after Varki, was it?
Yes.
After Varki. Yeah, who's also a Nairobian senior, right? Yeah. He was also. So, but 24 years. And if you can say that if SEPT, we all collectively recognize as something that, as an institution that in the teaching of architecture, especially in the undergraduate course, developed a certain authentic search deeply into architecture. Neelkant Chhaya was right at the heart of it. And he is one of the people who formed what you might call the soul of that institution. Of course, now it is undergoing some change, we know. So I think that's very important for us to recognize. And he was with us since from 2015, and he continues to take interest in education. He's still engaged with Srishti, where he continues to teach. Am I right? Yeah. And so that all that experience and wisdom and methodologies of teaching and the demonstration of how teaching is not merely a kind of practice, it's an art. I think that's, for me, what Professor Chhaya represents. So now that you're leaving us, after having contributed all these years of your wisdom to the Academic Council, I invite you, Professor Chhaya, to give us your words of wisdom. Thank you.
Thank you,
Go ahead.
Ashok. Thank you for that very kind and very happy introduction. I thought when I was asked to give this talk, I thought I should talk as if we have all met together in the academic council, or perhaps in the corridor outside, hanging around before we go into a studio, or we go into the director's office, or have lunch in the library. We are talking. And so I think one of the most wonderful things about coming to Kamla Raheja often was the kind of great richness of conversations that one had with everyone, with the students, with faculty, with Aniruddha, of course, and with Ashok and Narendra, who would have come, and then with once in a while some rib-tickling conversations with Rohan or with Sirish or with somebody else. And it was very nice. And I thought we should continue that kind of thing. So what I'm going to talk about is like what goes on now in education, in the profession, and this huge shock that we have had. Just before we started this talk, we were talking amongst ourselves about the effect that the pandemic has had on life in general, on everybody, on the teaching of architecture, on every such thing. And if we pay good attention to what it is making us stare in the face, what the pandemic is making us face, if we don't turn our faces away, but attend to it, then maybe we will come up with something different from the way we used to be. These thoughts have been going on for some time. A few days ago, one of my friends, who is an architect who studied under Paul Virilio, sent me an essay called The Museum of Accidents, which Virilio wrote in 1986. And he wrote that essay when a science museum was being designed, and he wanted them to think about science in a different way. So I'll just quote one little passage from the essay. So Virilio says, to innovate the vessel was already to innovate the shipwreck. To invent the steam engine, the locomotive, was again to invent the derailment or the rail catastrophe. So it goes for the birth of aviation, airplanes innovating air crashes, the air catastrophe. Not to mention the automobile and car pileups, electricity and electrocutions, nor especially those major technological hazards produced by the development of chemical and nuclear industry. Each period of technological development with its instruments and machines brings its share of specialized accidents, thus revealing en negative the scope of scientific thought. So what he's saying is that every time new knowledge comes, along with it is also the fouling up, the accidents that go with that form of control over reality. So it may set me thinking that could it be that the innovation or invention of biotechnology, or the innovation and invention of a space and place-free, abstract, immaterial world brought folded within it the catastrophe of a world of absolute freedom for viruses. Is not the pandemic the ultimate accident within substance that Virilio saw? I'll leave you to think over it. Even further back, another French thinker, Guy Debord, in 1967 wrote, "The entire life of societies in which modern conditions of production reign announces itself as an immense accumulation of spectacles. Everything that was directly lived has moved away into a representation." I repeat that, everything that was directly lived has moved away into a representation. I wonder whether we are doing the same to architecture. I'll continue Debord's statements. Further, he says somewhere, the spectacle presents itself as a vast, inaccessible reality that can never be questioned. The sole message is, what appears is good, what is good appears. We have all the media with which this kind of what appears happens. Instagram, all of them. The passive acceptance it demands is already effectively imposed by its monopoly of appearances, its manner of appearing without allowing any reply. Have we put ourselves into that kind of a corner now in architecture, where what appears, that means whatever is published is good, and whatever is good appears is published. And without that, we can't see anything having any quality at all? Have we put ourselves into that? Could it be that we were happily wrapped up in this society of spectacle, of endless consumption, of ever more, of ever new, and the virus caught us in our bedazzled state? Could it be so? Could it be that the frameworks that we have created for ourselves of creating a world of images has so disconnected us from flesh and blood reality that we forgot that we have bodies, and bodies have needs, and bodies fall sick and even die. And architecture is the site where bodies and the process of bodies and the process of the building's body simultaneously moving through. Architecture is that site. Did we forget that? And only think of the frozen image, that moment when the building is completed, it is ready, and it will be photographed, and then the photographs are final. Everything else goes away. And then afterwards, the building, maybe it deteriorates, but that doesn't matter. It was all there in that image. Have we reduced architecture to that state of needing absolute perfection and instantaneous image making that is there for a split second and over? And we are not concerned about how we live within architecture, or how architecture lives with us. This was brought very powerfully back to us by what happened in Delhi. The second wave and all the things that are happening not only in Delhi but all over the country. Bodies. But in the same moment, there is also an architecture which is being pursued relentlessly. So a few days ago, Arjun Appadurai wrote about the Central Vista project. And he said, it is also true that monumental public architecture has accompanied all great powers that had access to stone, labor, and engineering, from the pyramids and the Great Wall to the Brandenburg Gate and the Red Fort. Yes, we have to admit that architecture has been a tool in this process of creating the impressive, spellbinding image. That's been one of the jobs of architecture. But anyway, he says this is so, but then he goes on. So Appadurai says further, but Patel and his enablers and co-workers belong to a slightly different category, for which I would use the term the architecture of signaling. Signaling is a term used by economists who study market dynamics and in particular the mechanism of contracts to refer to the capacity of one agent to send a signal which conveys information to the other party in the contract in a situation where information is not equally shared. And then he goes on to say that the Central Vista project is a signal to the world at large. I won't go into that. We also have small time signals, like on the influencers and iconic buildings. But could Appadurai's signaling be the same as Guy Debord's spectacle? I quote Debord again. The root of the spectacle is that oldest of all social specializations, the specialization of power. The spectacle plays the specialized role of speaking in the name of all other activities. In the name of all other activities. Remember, this is in Delhi all around. It is hierarchical society's ambassador to itself, delivering its messages at a court where no one else is allowed to speak. The most modern aspect of the spectacle is thus also the most archaic. The spectacle is the ruling order's non-stop discourse about itself, its never-ending monologue of self-praise, its self-portrait at the stage of totalitarian domination of all aspects of life. The fetishistic appearance of pure objectivity, in spectacular relations conceals their true character as relations between people and between classes, a second nature with its own inescapable laws seems to dominate our environment. I think this is a very, very important sort of jolt to us as architects. Does this mean that now architecture is no longer to accompany and enliven the lived life, but has to become the ultimate handmaiden of the system that uses representation or spectacle or signal, that only what it says, what it wants to project to say, is important, not what it is, not what it does, not what my body and your body get out of it, but only the representation or the spectacle or the signal. In the interests of perpetuating a mode of existence which denies the sense of human agency, is our profession then doomed to be the creator of marvelous illusions that seduce humanity away from what is, and perpetuate the operation of a system of endless consumption and destruction? To answer that question is difficult, but I thought I'd try to get into it at least. A profession that seeks to create exclusive and certain knowledge will necessarily have to align itself with power and the machinery of economic activity. It will need these props to survive and perpetuate itself, because it wants that a share of that power and wants to impose its own certainties on the world at large. Believes that through certainty it can dominate nature, it can dominate the construction of cities, it can do all those things. So that's one way of thinking about a profession, as a set of people who have such specialized knowledge that only they and only they can deal with this situation. At the root of the profession becoming the tool of the perpetuation of the status quo, of the society of the spectacle, will be its definition of itself within that power, wealth, or dominance paradigm. So as long as the profession defines itself within that, every specialist profession tends to form a cabal of secret and authorized knowledge. Officially, you cannot be dead unless you are certified by a registered medical practitioner. Similarly, you cannot have a safe or sustainable building unless an architect and an engineer have certified it to be so. This leads to the isolation and excessive, even incorrect valuation given to partial insights. Traditional and informal knowledge systems could offer rich but uncertifiable paradigms. Today they seem to be replaced by professional markets within which with the assistance of the media, replace the good with the impressive and the attractive. The profession must find in itself the courage not to collaborate with the ongoing processes of brainwashing minds into the marketplace of trendy media cultures. This is difficult in an era of techno-managerial control and market and media-driven economies. Architects will have to connect more directly to people, places, and practices. They will have to find ingenious ways of attending to real conditions. This might need and might allow alternate terms of framing knowledge, distinct from professional jargon and the fashions in the magazines. The professional world ideally has to become the repository, the seed bank, the hotbed, and the petri dish that preserves, protects, extends, questions, and generally keeps alive that messy and unmanageable diversity of knowledges and practices in the face of the entropic nuclear winter of a universalized monoculture of mind. So that's what the profession, we have to, as professionals, how do we redefine ourselves? Yet this outlook can only come about if we put away the hubris inherent in expert culture. We very arrogantly believe that we know, others don't, which in most cases we find to be somewhat incorrect. But still, we hold that. As long as we hold that, we cannot redefine ourselves, our profession. A mechanistic conception of natural and human worlds, combined with the positivistic and reductive philosophy of life, have fragmented our understanding of the world into narrow and conflicting specializations. In view of the complex, interconnected, and urgent issues facing the world today, it is not sufficient to develop expertise alone, as this kind of directed knowledge fragments real problems into illusory disciplinary domains, creating experts who compete to establish the supremacy of the domain of knowledge without taking the whole situation into account. The historical need for professional specialization, perhaps at some point in time it might have been necessary. I do not deny that. It could be so. The historical need for professional specialization has to be supplanted by a multidimensional and unified approach as a response to the grave and urgent problems that society faces. The professional needs to continually evolve and apply dialogic work processes, not controlling work processes, not commanding work processes, but dialogic work processes. The paradigm of absolute and explicit knowledge is connected to the desire to overcome uncertainty and incompleteness. We have given much prestige to the scientific determinism, which believes that once we know, we can control all reality. Of course, the pandemic has really challenged this. The further tragic extension of this attitude is the dictum, if we can do it, we must do it. The hubris of this control mentality destroys the sense of value and discrimination, what we call viveka in India. We need to learn the humility to accept degrees of uncertainty and frame our professional tasks as interactive learning processes attempting to resolve questions of the human occupation of the world. What about the place of learning then? Is the place of learning to become a tool of this worldwide production consumption system, or is it a manner of exploring a different mode of relating to the world? And both are possible. It can be something that makes industry-ready modules, I wouldn't call them people, industry-ready modules which fit into the status quo. Or should it be something that is creating a sort of ferment which will not allow the status quo to just perpetuate? Is it a manner of exploring a different mode of relating to the world? So architecture comes about in the milieu of materials, people, and places. Its aim should be appropriateness that attends to the interdependence of all existence. It would therefore need to be about frugality and simplicity, simply because there's a limit to what we have therefore, not because there is some great spiritual authenticity or something like that, it simply is a practical requirement to be frugal and simple. Such is since it is the receptacle of processes, and it's not just a box that you make and which remains forever, it's a receptacle of processes. It would give thought, that is, architecture would give thought to long and short durations of time, to permanence and durability, as much as to ephemeral fragility. At its best, it might elevate material realities to a spiritual intensity. Not all works of architecture can do that, but once in a while, one comes upon that magic. The place of learning architecture, then, must awaken a hunger, a longing, an intense activeness that would help sustain a journey of discovery. Only participation in the world of actual people, places, and materials can sustain such a journey of discovery. It must be connected to the world as it is, not the world as it comes through in the images of the world. The place of learning must be a place of diverse forms of knowledge. In societies which have not yet progressed or succumbed to a techno-managerial uniformity, and here we still have a chance, there continue to exist many social patterns, many place qualities, many crafts and practices, and many languages. Traditional knowledge is a global resource of offering valuable alternate ethical frameworks. Not just technologies, not just technical means, ethical frameworks, epistemologies, and aesthetic paradigms. This resource must be guarded. This resource of knowledge from all around us, everywhere, must be guarded and nurtured as strongly as natural resources. For these vessels of human culture, each institution of learning should become a harbor, welcoming, sheltering, watering, and provisioning the ships that come in from near and far. That means that the School of Architecture is a place of not just the acknowledged and certified experts in architecture, but it is also a place where those who make things in their own ways are also welcomed, are also made part of the camaraderie of building up knowledge together. So finally, what should a school be? The illusion of power, control, and endless wealth is a natural consequence of separating material reality from cultural forms. We substitute images for actualities. Perhaps we cannot go on for very long with this structure. We can already see all kinds of catastrophes that the material world is presenting to us all around the world, ranging from climate change to volcanoes to all kinds of things which have increased in both occurrences as well as in intensity. But also so many others, like the pandemic itself is one of the signals, it's one of the hints that we have too long failed to attend to material reality. We cannot go on very long with this structure, and we may have to again find ways in which ideas travel, but are forced to confront inherent limits built into our gross reality. We see then that the first hand flesh and blood experience of difference in each place, in every range of places, is a value that global interaction could offer. And the erasure of difference is the threat that it presents. Coming, the world as it comes closer to each other, you can start erasing the differences and erasing all kinds of cultures which exist. Or it's a value that you learn from. Both of these are two sides of the same coin. The one side is grounded in the real, yet dreams up stories. The other offers reasoned and efficient control over what is real, thus falling into self-delusion. What should we choose? More important than choosing, more realistic, is perhaps to be sharply aware that only our constant engagement with our local conditions, combined with a zest for adventure or of the unexpected that the globe offers, is the razor's edge where creative life is born. Let there be no equalization of standards. Let stories travel and real people meet each other, and strangenesses give birth to creative outpouring. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for that extremely sensitive, critical, and awakening talk. I would now like to call upon our former director, Professor Anirudh Paul, to say a few words. Paul, over to you.
Okay. Can you hear me? Am I audible?
Yes, Paul.
Yes, Paul.
Okay. Okay, thank you, Professor Chaya. I think this is a timely reminder, and like it helps us to, like, what we are going through, the shock event that we are facing, helps us to actually take this as an opportunity and be able to find new directions in the discipline itself, which is very much required. I completely agree with you, and that's something which is very much something, like, I believe also very near to us, because the school has been discussing this and been like trying to understand what this means, the shock events mean, and through I think the Kamla Reja Memorial Lecture Series also, like, the school has been closely trying to engage with this, that what does it mean for education, what does it mean for practice, what does it mean for our cities that we live in. So absolutely, I think this is something which you have been able to encapsulate so well, the problem at hand and what could be the new challenges that we face. So thank you for that. And also, I have been asked to thank you also for your association at the KRVI and at the Academic Council, and also to say that not only the Academic Council, you have always been a part of academic faculty. Yeah, because though Professor Chaya was invited in the Academic Council, but within no time he became a part of the everyday academic milieu of the KRVI. And I think this was only possible, which already you all have experienced through his talk, the intense quest for knowledge to comprehend the architecture and urbanism of the region. And that makes him such an intensely thinking academician as well as a practitioner. Like, I know that he has done some few architectural buildings, also some master plans, which actually encapsulate what he has been talking about. So that's very, very important. I think it's an amazing gift that actually his colleagues, Professor B.V. Doshi, late Professor Kurula Varki, to name a few, they all have it. And what sets him apart, I think, is the depth of knowledge he has about allied cultural practices of the region and connect them to architecture. I have been like always in discussion with him, and that's what I have felt about him, that is absolutely his knowledge about this place, what he calls as the locale, okay, about the real, what he calls, is something absolutely phenomenal. And Professor Chaya has obviously contributed immensely through his lectures, his writings, as well as his projects. Yes. So, I think Ashok has to some extent been able to introduce Chaya and been able to talk about it. This I won't go on to dwell about this. And but though his credentials which he has could make him formidable, I think in the college he was the most approachable person. In fact, as I've said, within no time he could actually relate himself, and the faculty as well as the student community could relate with him immediately. And apart from sharing his immense experience in the academic council, he got involved with the college's activities, guiding faculty, preparing course content. That's been some of his, he did it very effortlessly. It did not require him to have any formal arrangement for that. And I must mention that some of the faculty actually were his students at CEPT and who still relate with him with a lot of love and respect. A lot of people who are at KRVI who actually have been his student. And yes, he has influenced them to become thinking and reason and responsible practitioners. Most of them are like that, very thinking and responsible practitioners. And I believe all who have interacted with him through his long association with CEPT have this characteristic. In fact, I have been personally lucky to closely associate with him on projects where with immense ease, like I have been there, he could create a collective learning environment with like-minded people. Okay, and one such initiative was the history project that Ashish Ganju, whom we lost recently due to COVID-19, had started. And he was another person, Ashish was another person, I believe, also who had such a quality. So Professor Chaya is something who was so approachable, that something which will be missed. And because of this ability, he was called for juries, he was called for workshops, and even conduct studios in the college. In fact, I should mention that in the occasion of the 25 years of the KRVI, he was involved in conceiving the event Cities and Water, which that comprised of a architectural competition, an exhibition, as well as a symposium. In fact, it was a semester-long event, if I remember. It was a semester-long event, and the event was a great success. Like the way he could, I'm more interested in the process, the way he could inspire a set of students, faculty, to work with him towards getting them involved in this whole act of creating this event, which happened for 6 months, was amazing. So I think it would be a great loss for KRVI not to have him around and continue influencing students and faculty. And as I've said, it was more than just an association with Academic Council. But I would like to sincerely thank him for being with us in the college, and would wish that he continues his association in some form. Thank you, Professor Chaya.
Anirudh, I definitely will not discontinue my association with all of you people. It's been a wonderful journey together. And
yeah,
formally, I may not be on the Academic Council, but I will be available, and I'll drop in and pester you whenever I feel like. So please beware.
Sure.
Thank you, Paul, for those wonderful words. I would now like to invite Sonal, our faculty member, to express her thoughts. Sonal, over to you.
I think she needs to be given access, Vanita. Just one second.
I have made her. She's a presenter, Ankush.
All right, I can unmute myself.
Yeah.
Hi. Hello, everyone. I just want to say thank you, Professor Chaya, for being such a provocative presence in the school. And although I'm not as well acquainted as a lot of people here, I've never been taught under or taught with Professor Chaya. I have been charged with the task of saying things. So I shall speak with the authority of someone who loves from afar, having eavesdropped on conversations in classrooms, in the staff room, and envying students in the way a lot of people love the best teachers. The kind who do not make those silly separations between students, the real world, between practice, unique selves and histories, or academics and learning. To me, he seems to embody perpetual inquiry in the seriousness with which he has imagined the mischievous and potent agency of learners. He reminds us, as always, through example and teaching, of the urgency and the practicality of inquiry as a mode of being. Thank you, sir, for being such an inspiring and provocative presence in the school over the years. We hope you keep coming back to recharge us. And it's really lovely to see you on screen and hear you after so long. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sonal. Actually, I think we know each other very well. We used to stand at the gate waiting for a rickshaw. And we have had many conversations even there, apart from having lunch together.
Yes.
There can't be more than that. So thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Sonal. Thank you very much. Now, before I throw open the floor for discussion and debate, on behalf of the entire KRVI fraternity, I would like to thank Professor Chaya for his valuable participation and contribution to the academics at the Institute, express deep regret to bid goodbye, especially on an online platform, and look forward to his continued participation. Thank you, everyone. Thank you very much. I would now first like to invite Shirish to say something.